And as part of measures to address the incidence of food-borne illnesses, government is to launch a public education campaign aimed at children, parents, caregivers, and the broader community on food safety and the identification, handling, and storage of dangerous chemicals. Mthokozisi Nkosi, who is a food safety consultant as well as a pest control specialist, joins us now for further analysis. Mthokozisi, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Are these cocktail of interventions announced by the president sufficient to address what has been a long-standing crisis?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon to you and to the viewers at home. I think the first thing that we must say here is we in our industry, we fear that in terms of the interventions that are being mentioned, there are already regulations that are in place that govern food safety and how food safety should function. So there isn't anything really new that has been said. And the concern is the enforcement of these, some of these requirements or the new regulations or what would you say, announcement by the president. But I think the president had to do that because he has to be seen to act. But in terms of what he has announced, there are already regulations, and the main issue is enforcement. There isn't anything new except perhaps the 21-day period and some of the strict measures in terms of giving direction as to how this is going to go about. But in essence, there isn't anything really new about what he has said.
Perhaps to ask this, and I asked this earlier on to an earlier interlocutor on this conversation, what is it that needs to be done to change the culture of food safety compliance? Because that's ultimately what it comes down to, but also a culture of pest control compliance. Pesticides like Turbophos, which is an organophosphate, are not meant for domestic use. They're meant for agrarian use. Why is it then that it's used in the domestic setting? It speaks a lot to the culture of compliance, but also a culture of knowing what is the difference between this pest control and actual domestic pest controls. Where are we getting it wrong?
I think the main issue here is enforcement. I think it's important to keep on saying that it wouldn't help, no matter how many regulations that can be released left, right, and center. The main thing here is enforcement of the current regulations. And of course, the general lawlessness in this country. So I don't think it would ever be solved if enforcement is not up to speed of the current regulations, and also in terms of the general lawlessness and people doing as they please. Because if you look at some of the measures, for example, in terms of food safety, there are already regulations that govern how that should be in terms of pests that should be how pests should be handled. One of the requirements is that the pests that are being handled, especially in food premises, generally it will be, or it actually can only be registered pests. So those pests will have L numbers and must be registered with the Department of Agriculture as per the Act 36 of 1947. And there are some pesticides, depending on the categories, that can only be used by or applied by pest control operators that are registered with the department. So the issue here is the access of these pests. Anyone can access them, and there is no one really who's checking, is it being applied by a registered pest control operator?
Right.
Yeah.
So what happens in the pest control value chain from manufacturing and production points to the point of wholesale? Surely there must be a lot more stringent focus on that part of the value chain to ensure that only registered and duly certificated operators are able to buy and access pesticides.
Yes, but as I said, it depends on the categories, but most of them are available. So the pest that you get, for example, if you go buy a certain pesticide to control rodents, there are some retail shops that will only, or pest control companies that will only allow a registered pest control operator to buy. But unfortunately, no one is enforcing and checking if that's the case. But some other pests, which are equally poisonous, can be found in any other warehouse store or a retail store. So perhaps the attention should shift into making sure that there is also enforcement in terms of the pesticide, which can be available to individuals at any retail store or any shop, and those that can only, and we can say that based on the toxicity, these can only be sold in certain stores based on the fact that they can only be purchased by registered pest control operators. So there is already something like that. There is in fact something where the pest control companies that are selling this pesticide can only sell to them, but unfortunately some of the pesticides in the value chain are not controlled and are freely available in the open market.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time, Mthokozisi. Really do appreciate it. Mthokozisi Nkosi is a food safety and pest control consultant. Thank you so much for that.